Sorry, this video is a day late. Not been feeling well, just like everybody else. So one of the questions or one of the concerns that my students presented to me is they were worried about public speaking and teaching. And a lot of them said they, didn't know if they could remember it all or do it just right or that sort of thing. And so that kind of clued me in to how they saw teaching. And so I want to say public speaking and teaching are two totally different things. Are there some aspects of public speaking and teaching? Well, sure. You're speaking in front of a group of people. But that's not your job. So let's talk about that. So teaching is a public speaking. First of all, public speaking is typically a monologue, whereas teaching should be a dialogue. In other words, dialogue means a flow of meaning. So while you are speaking to your students, you cannot, like if you have a 90-minute class in high school, you can't just talk at them for 90 minutes. I know some of your professors have done that. That doesn't mean that it was good or effective. It might have been if they're really good at that. And we'll talk about that here in a minute. But monologue literally means speaking alone. Most students will tune you out in a few minutes at any level. And if they're little, they're going to get jittery and all that stuff. So it needs to be interactive. It needs to be interspersed with questions and responses and that sort of thing if you are using a lecture type of teaching. So a teacher is a designer of experiences, but should not be the sole proprietor of knowledge. And the reason for that is, what do you really know that I can't Google? Really, what you know that I can't Google are your personal experiences with the subject matter. Like when I was learning this, I had to think of it this way. Or when I was learning this light bulb came on because of this thing or that thing. This is a connection I've made. So those things that are subjective can't be Googled, but the basic objective facts, the skills, even the teaching of them, I can Google. So what value do you add to this whole experience? And first of all, why would you limit students to only your knowledge? While I'm very proud of my French and English degree from ETSU, I wouldn't want to limit my students to just what I learned there. I might not have made an A in everything, even. And even if I had, there's a lot more knowledge and a lot more depth out there than what I just learned. So I need to be a designer of experiences for students so that they can come to an understanding, they can learn the material, they can develop skills on their own. If it's just trying to transfer stuff from my brain to their brain, that is a very weak formula for getting students to learn. Facilitation. That's what teachers are. They're not speakers, they're facilitators. So good teaching is designing instruction and setting it into motion. So you think about all of the variables. You think about what you're teaching, what you're going to use to assess that, and what they need to know, and how will they be different as a result of knowing these things. You have to consider your individual learners in your classroom, and good teaching, therefore, starts with good planning. So how do you plan for this very specific group of learners? And keep in mind, it is all phenomenological. It has everything to do with the learners in your classroom. And that's why when people use the same lesson plans for 25 years, that's where the holes start coming in. Because what might work well for one group of students might not work well for another. Think about it. You've got different people with different sets of knowledge and different group dynamics, and I could go on and on and on with all the variables, but you need a plan around these things. Designing instruction. So you're being nervous about the part where you're speaking in front of people, I get, but that is a small part of your job. Now, I know that lecture has taken a hit as a form of instruction, and in the book Bold School, he talks about this great lecturer that he had when he was student teaching, and tried to replicate that and failed. So lecture can be an effective form of instruction if you hone your skills. And lectures work best when you can tell a story. Every time I encounter a history major, I can almost trace it back to one history teacher they had that was absolutely amazing at telling stories about history. And they talk about this man or this woman who just made it come alive for them, and they were inspired and they really got into the subject matter, and that's why. So that does work, but you have to be really good at it for that to be your primary way of teaching. And I'll tell you, even those people who are great at lecture design good assessments and good assignments around that that fills in all of the gaps. If you are lecturing, please pay attention to how long you're speaking. Again, attention spans matter, and the younger a student is, the lower their attention span is. I would never lecture to high school students longer than 15 or 20 minutes. I would never lecture to middle school students longer than 15 minutes or 10. And I would never lecture to very small, the little ones, the elementary students, for longer than 5 or 10 minutes. And while you are lecturing, if you intersperse questions and other audience reactions, that's going to work even better. You'll get better engagement. But again, like we said last week with classroom management, if you're lecturing for 30 minutes and students stop paying attention, don't take that out on them. That's your fault. And the worst thing you can do as an instructor, you didn't do your lesson plans, you didn't think about it, and you came in and you got nothing, and you're just going to try to wing it by lecturing for 90 minutes or 45 minutes or whatever, you are going to have a very, very, very bad day unless you just get totally lucky. So that's what I have to say about public speaking. If you're nervous about that, you can always do things like go to Toastmasters. Every town and city has a Toastmasters, but I would focus more on what is actually going to be the meat and potatoes of your job, which are planning well, designing instruction, differentiation, all of those things, rather than worrying about, well, I have a soft voice, and so I'm not going to be good at lecturing. Lecturing is the least important part of what you do if you're doing everything else just right. And those skills will come with time. And you need to be practicing. You need to tell, when you student teach, you need to tell your mentor teacher what your goals are. I mean, they're going to set some for you anyway, but you might have personal goals. So that's what you need to be crafting during your residency experiences, or whatever they're called, during your student teaching, all of that. Hone those skills, because when you get hired for a job, you've got a short amount of time to get things right. And so really, like I said, I think 15 times now, hone those skills when you're student teaching. That's all for this week.